Today I want to talk about arching during the bench press. Why to do it, how to do it, I'll explain why it's completely safe when done properly. Now there is such thing as a good arch and a bad arch. Knowing how and why you're arching has a huge impact on whether or not it's safe or effective for you. Now people have different degrees of arch depending on things like leverages, flexibility, and biomechanics. It's important to know your own limitations and don't go beyond them. So don't turn to the exercise on the bench just to get a PR. Make sure your butt stays down, your shoulders stay down, and stick within the range that you got. Now, people arch for a few different reasons. It helps create stability, maintains tension, and transfers energy from your lower to upper body. It engages the most muscles, produces the most amount of force to lift the most amount of weight. It's not seen as an isolation movement. If you want to isolate the pecs, there's a lot of other exercises to do. This is a way to keep your shoulders safe, to keep your upper back tight, and to keep your whole body tense while lifting the most weight possible on the bench. So another thing it does, it also decreases the distance the bar has to travel. So by getting set up and sticking your chest up to the bar, so with your thoracic spine arched and retracting and depressing your shoulders, you're decreasing the distance the bar has to travel, requiring less work to be done. So in powerlifting, this is a huge benefit, right? Now I'm going to go over how to arch.
All right, there are a ton of different ways to get set up for the bench press. This is what I do personally and works for me the best. I like to put my feet up on the bench, dig my shoulder blades into the bench, and then drop my feet on the ground while bringing the bar with my lats at the same time dropping my butt onto the bench. Now from here, I'm thinking about pulling the bar down with my lats, driving the floor with my feet, and pushing back to the start position. You'll see in the second video, so here I have no arch. I'm bringing down the bar to my chest, my elbows are going underneath the bench, and my shoulders are protruding forward. Overall, this feels a lot less stable, and I feel a lot less powerful in this position. You'll see from the next angle here that as I unrack the bar here, my shoulders are almost off the bench. I come down, I get in some anterior glide on the front of my shoulder. This could cause some major issues in the long run, especially with a loaded barbell. Right now I'm using an empty one, so it's not a big issue. And then you see I rack the bar, get set up, push the shoulder blades into the bench, and now you're going to see when I start to bench, there's very little, if not no movement at the shoulder. Now, here's another quick test you can do just to see how tight your setup is. This is Steve Castioli. I'm going to grab him, pull him off the floor. He's relaxed. I tell him to get set up like a bench press, and he comes up all together. Give it a try for yourself.
I got Mr. Shreds here. I'm going to explain to you guys why it's completely safe to arch during the bench press. So the first thing what you notice is he's in a neutral position. We all have a natural lordotic curve in the lower back. What we're trying to focus on is the area more of the thoracic region. We're trying to get the sternum, the rib cage, the chest up to the bar so we can decrease that distance the bar has to travel and to create more scapular or shoulder stability, because our axis point, so where the load is over, would be where the shoulders and scapula is. There's no actual load placed through the spine at all. People say you're going to break your back during the bench press, you're going to snap yourself up during arch. If you do it properly, right, if you get more of a global curvature in the spine, you're completely safe. What they are talking about is more of a localized hinge. So say for example, you just anteriorly rotated your pelvis and just hinge in a localized area. That would cause some excessive extension since you're already in some extension at the lower lumbar, and that would cause some herniations, some fatigue fractures, stuff we're gonna look out for. But what I want you to think about is about gravity. Now where is gravity going? Gravity is going down the whole time, right? If you have the bar, say this is the top of your bench press position, right? The force is going directly down your forearm, through your elbow, through your shoulder, your scap, into the bench. Now the second you move it forward, right, like this, you're creating a moment arm. So that axis point where the load is being placed is still in the shoulder, right? But your muscles are fighting gravity, you're resisting gravity from coming down this way. Now during the bench press motion, as you bring the bar down, right, your muscles are resisting gravity. The force is being placed through your forearm, which remains almost vertical, into the elbow through the floor, right? There's no actually pressure on the spine. The pressure or the access point is still in the shoulder and scapular region. When you pause on the chest, you're not actually letting the weight sit on your chest. Some people say that because you pause, you're putting pressure on the spine. That's very, very minimal pause if you do it properly, right? You're just slightly pausing on the chest. The force maintains in the forearm right down through the floor, and you're coming back up to the same position. Now under that whole time, as long as your glutes stay anchored, your upper back stays anchored, there's no actual force or shearing on the spine at all. You're maintaining the same position. Now this would be completely different if, say, his head's gonna fall off, but if, say, you were standing up, right, and you had a huge arch in your back. You have force coming down and shear from the arch, right? So that would be a little bit different story.
Okay, so this is when the arch would become dangerous. So you have a load on top of the spine and you have the arch causing some shear force. Any sort of loaded movements where you're standing up, you want to make sure that you brace and maintain neutral the best you can.
Okay, there's one other issue I want to talk about, is when people say you're going to break your back or snap yourself up during the bench press arch, what exactly does that mean, right? No one can give you a definitive answer to what it means to actually break your spine during the bench press. Now, we already took apart compressive load and shear force. We explained why there's no actually compressive load on the spine during the bench press. Your glutes stay anchored, your shoulders stay anchored. The access point or where the load is carried over would be over the shoulder and scapular region, right? Now, as far as breaking your back, there's two things I can think of. And I'm going to explain why they're extremely minimal. Now, it's a fatigue fracture or a disc herniation would be the probable causes that could happen in the spine, but they are very minimal. Now, fatigue fracture would be caused by compressive load over time, right? That would be if you're in a bench press position for, say, a few hours a day, right? You're in that position, that lordotic position. That might cause some fatigue fractures, some hairline fractures in the joint, but you're in this position for, I'd say, 10 minutes a week at most. You're not in that bench position unless you're doing a lot of volume, right? So that is very minimal for that to happen. Now, the other thing is what everyone knows is a disc herniation or disc bulge or slip disc, people call it. That mostly happens, it's very common on the posterior side, right? That's because we have a natural lordotic curve in our lower back already. And since we're already in the extension, it's very unlikely to have an anterior disc bulge. That's for two main reasons. So we have huge ligaments to help protect herniations. Your anterior and posterior longitudinal ligament. That runs all the way down your spinal cord and protects for herniations. Now you can see even on this skeleton here, he has a posterior herniation right here, if you can see it on the camera. Now your anterior ligament on the front side is a lot more thicker and dense than your posterior side, right? The chance of anterior herniations is extremely minimal, right? Most herniations happen from loaded flexion, not from loaded extension, and they happen in the lumbar region. So I hope that sort of clears up some issues for it, and as long as you keep the load being placed over the shoulder and scapular region, there's no load, there's no force placed on the spine, and we already talked about how there's no sort of chance for you to snap your spine up unless you're up and the load is being placed down directly on your spine. That would be a different story, but otherwise, the bench press arch is safe.